I've lived it in the mud, the chaos, and the moments nobody writes about. This show is the truth, raw, unfiltered, and built for leaders who actually give a damn. If you're ready to grow, ready to own your own story, and ready to lead from the front, you're in the right place. Speak up, show up, lead. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Speak Up, Show Up, Lead Leadership Live Edition. I'm your host, JJ Hardy, and I'm here with my co-host, Chris Pinkowski. How you doing today, Chris?
Looks like I'm frozen, but oh, there you go. I was frozen for a second.
You were.
But I'm good. How you doing, JJ?
Well, I'm doing great. It's Saturday. It's not pouring down rain anymore. We're out of that spell, and so things are looking up.
Awesome.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about why everything falls apart when you leave. And to me, it's a natural transition from what we were talking about, because all these great things, we were talking about goals and getting yourself set up and then all that other stuff. Now we're going to move into leadership again, but we're going to move into organizational leadership, in that, making yourself, why everything falls apart when you leave, I guess, making yourself not the person that everybody relies on.
Yep.
But why you're still needed. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. So this series, I really like this series a lot. And, we're going to be talking over the next several weeks about when it's time to get in the weeds versus when it's time to step back. And what you'll find a lot of times is when leaders are too much in the weeds all the time, when they finally do kind of step away, the leaders that are just constantly in the weeds have not transferred that knowledge to people. And then something happens, they get promoted, find another job, they leave for whatever reason, things start to fall apart because everyone's gotten used to the leader just like doing things for them. They haven't transferred accountability to other folks. And now people are looking around like, what's next? I used to just ask JJ what to do next, or even worse, JJ would tell me what to do next. And now I'm lost. I'm like a lost puppy out here, and I'm freaking out.
Yeah, it's definitely the truth that, when you micromanage, there are definitely second and third order effects from that. And this is why it's so important for you when you start digging into the weeds to help solve problems like what we talked about last time.
Mm-hmm.
Why it is so important to step away a little bit. But if you are always in the weeds, if you start off that way and you have to be that, I guess it's not even hands-on, it's more than hands-on. It's, you have to be all up in everybody's business all the time. You lose trust. The morale in the organization is going to be lower because nobody feels like they're trusted. And, it just causes all kinds of problems. This is exactly why it's important not to micromanage, but we can dig into more on what micromanaging is here in just a second. That way we can kind of define that and push through to make sure we understand why it's not why you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. It's, we'll say often.
Oh, bless you.
Man. Thank you. Welcome to allergy season, everybody.
Oh yeah, no, it's bad.
We've said plenty of times how leadership is like parenting, and it's our job as leaders to teach and to get out of the way and be a resource to people. But this is kind of like I don't know, you have these helicopter parents who are always tying little Johnny's shoes. And then next thing you know, little Johnny's 12 years old and he's on a class trip and his shoe comes untied and he doesn't know how to tie his shoe. And everyone else is like, dude, what's wrong with you? You can't tie your shoes. You're 12 years old. Well, my mom always ties my shoes. Okay. Mom has set you up for failure, little man, and I'm sorry for that. But that's what we're talking about here. You're setting your people up for failure when you're constantly doing things for them versus teaching them, letting them skin their knees a little bit.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with people making mistakes. I think leaders, I don't know if they're afraid of their people making mistakes because it's going to be a reflection on them, or they want to be protective of their people and they don't want them to feel a certain way about making mistakes. Guess what? We learn from mistakes.
Yes.
Skinning your knee sometimes is what you need. And then you get right back up and you keep on going and you learn not to do that thing again that you just scraped your knee on.
That's true. A real world example, when I was on active duty and I got my first warrant officer assignment after I finished school, I moved over to Hawaii. Of course, I'm not going to mention any names. And if, this person is watching, I apologize for mentioning anything too specific here, but it was really interesting. I showed up and I started working, and all of my downtrace units, they just did not, they did not understand the ins and outs of all the paperwork and the preparation and the planning the way they should. And I didn't understand why. I was doing my left seat, right seat. So, that was fine. But once that stopped and the person I was replacing left, I started finding that the expectation for me was not necessarily from my boss or my boss's boss, but from everybody that I was supporting, that I do all the paperwork, that I'm the one who organizes everything, does the brief to their own battalion, it's like their immediate sub CEO. Think of the military as like a private equity firm or something like that at every level. It kind of works that way. And it was a problem. Well, I'm going to tell you that with that expectation, with me being one guy and having one employee that was that worked with me, that was responsible for doing this stuff, there was no way. I don't know how I did it for a while because that's what was there and I had to figure out how to change it. But it was a nightmare. We were always working. So that's the first problem. And that's what micromanaging gets you, is you're always going to be busy. You're going to be busier than you've ever been in your entire life. The second part is once I start, once I started transitioning from that, and I started giving more of that work to them, which by the way was theirs. I wasn't in their unit. I was in their higher headquarters. Then they were almost freaking out because they didn't know what to do. And so they kept on coming to me. And then they went to my boss, and they went to my boss's boss, and I was the bad guy. And then I started seeing a change where they started to appreciate it and they started to become more competent. And then the questions became less. But my gosh, that took like 7 or 8 months. And so, I'm glad Chris started off with his analogy, but I had to put a real world perspective in there from the workplace, because if you are digging in the weeds too long and you're doing things for your employees because you don't trust that they're going to do it the right way themselves, the news is for you folks is that they're not going to be able to do it for themselves. If you want people to be competent in what they do, you have to empower them to do that. And when you empower them to do that, it's uncomfortable. At first, they're not going to like it. They're not going to want to do it. They're going to be resistant, but then they're going to appreciate it in the end, and they're going to be more competent, and everyone around them is going to probably have an easier time as a result of it, because if one person is doing everything for everybody, that one person is going to miss something. So it's better to empower
100%.
your people than to try to get in the weeds and do it all yourself because you don't trust them to do it.
Absolutely. And it's there is absolutely that trust factor. There's some ego that can get in there too. You know, I've seen micromanagers who are just because they're the smartest person in the room, and that's what led to them being in a leadership position. It's that ego that keeps them from passing down that knowledge, because secretly they're protecting their position. So, hey, the more I know and the less you know gives me some job security, and it keeps the pecking order where I want the pecking order to be.
Right.
So there are so many lenses here. And I don't know if you're seeing this, JJ, but our chat is blowing up.
It is blowing up. And actually there's a lot of these is just a lot of thank yous, and this is a great
Yeah.
topic and stuff like that. But there is one here, a gentleman, Bob, he wanted to know, how do you identify a single point of failure in a team? And so, Bob, I think we'll cover that.
Yeah.
So I suppose, since Chris just went, I can give my perspective real quick. But identifying a single point of failure on a team is not going to be super, super easy right away. But I would say the first person is, if everybody in their section, it has a lower performance rate than other sections, that's probably one. Two, if you see a bunch of standing around in that section, that's probably another one. Also, if you hear a lot of complaining in that person's section, with the people that they're responsible for, that's also going to be another one. And the reason that stuff is happening is because they're digging in the weeds. They don't feel like their boss trusts them. There's probably going to be a high turnover in that section as well, to be quite honest with you, because when somebody is micromanaging and digging into the weeds for too long, people don't like to work for a person that doesn't give them any room to improve, make mistakes, just do their job. So that, I think that's probably the first thing. What do you think about that? The first things. What do you think about that, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, those are all symptoms that you could be looking for. And what you can also do is, if it's not very clear, if you're not seeing those certain things, what I would start to do is start to remove people, not totally remove them from the team, but hey, I need you to step back, and I'm going to reassign you to a project, and it's going to be a week. And so start to look systematically at the people on the team, probably starting with the leader, and like, you know what, I need you to step out for a week. And if performance just like cliff dives, that leader was a single point of failure. Start to move people around, start to kind of cross train or cross pollinate people. And if you see that the failure is moving along with a certain individual, that's where you pinpoint development needs to happen. So kind of mix up the deck, for lack of a better word, and see where the cards fall. And that could help you out too. Just like, hey, random, we're going to change it up today, guys, and see what shakes out of it.
Yeah. And we had a comment in here. What systems do you recommend documenting first in a growing business? We might cover that in the future. If that's something that interests you, please make sure you go and send me an email. Since you're on YouTube, Russ, I can put that below. When Chris talks next time, I'll put it, but it's jj@victoryleadershipcoaching.com. So please just send me an email about that and more insights on what you're talking about when it comes to growing a business. And I'd be happy to reach out to you, Russ. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, that's very that's kind of broad. Like
It's a really,
there's
really
so many
broad.
variables that could
Yes.
go into that answer. Yeah.
Type of business, solopreneur, multi-employee business. There are many things there. I want to know more about that, Russ, but please go ahead and just send that to me in an email. That's something that we can talk about, especially if it's a business that has personnel. There's definitely some things there that are probably key, but I'd like to know more about that, and so would Chris. Okay. Great energy to kick off the show. Okay, so these are just great comments. Thank you, everybody, for participating. But I like how you transitioned from, I kind of gave you all of the symptoms. Gave everybody the symptoms, and then you went into the diagnosis. I think it's really important to not only identify that there's a problem. Root cause analysis is very, very good, but you have to not just get to the root cause. You have to also be able to solve that. And that's great, folks, because when you have this problem going on where there is a bottleneck in your organization, or why everything falls apart when you leave, or that's what we're talking about right now. Next week's topic is the bottleneck, even though I think we've kind of already gone there. But it can change. Just know that it can change. I gave the real world example of it taking about 6, 7, 8 months to really turn around after I took over. The more people you have involved, the longer it takes. I had tons of people involved. I had over 36 people just in my group of additional duty people that were involved in that change. And that's why they were so resistant. Not only that, but they were also senior leaders. So if you've been doing something one way for so long, I mean, why would you change it? Well, because sometimes things just need change, but they didn't like that. Who does like change? I don't think anybody actually likes change. They want to change. They need the change. They know they need the change. But when change starts to happen, you get that yucky feeling in your gut. So that's why there's resistance, because you just don't want to do it. If things have been working okay for this long, why do we got to go and screw up what's been working? No, that's not how that goes. Sometimes in order to make things better, you got to do the uncomfortable thing. So I'm great that we did the diagnosis, because once you diagnose that there's a problem, you can't just let it keep on sitting there and infecting that part of your organization. You got to do something about it.
Absolutely. And yeah, I don't want to take us too far off of topic, but
it's on topic. Why everything falls apart when you leave. I mean, you got to fix it.
Well, what I was going to say is, you've got to embrace change. You've got to, the way that we grow as an organization is oftentimes through change. It's figuring out there's a better way to do this. Let's iterate, let's learn, let's keep on going. But to kind of tie that into today's topic, if you're constantly micromanaging and you're constantly in the weeds, then the chances of you changing something are going to be dramatically lower, because you're going to have tunnel vision. And it's like, look, I'm just constantly doing this. I'm micromanaging. I don't even see what the other opportunities are for us to chase, or how do we improve this, because I'm just like this all day long. And a leader, there needs to be some balance, right? There are times, and they should be few, that you have to micromanage or that you have to really get in the weeds. For the most part, you should be looking up and out versus in and down in your business, or in whatever capacity that you're leading.
Yeah. And let me add to that here in just a second, but have you seen, let me just put it up here. Have you seen organizations successfully eliminate single points of failure, and how did they do it? Yes, I actually had a coaching client about 2 years ago who in his business, he thought that there were 3 or 4 different single points of failure. And this is something, folks, that you got to realize too, because this happens. But once we started digging in and doing some training, and I just did some interviews and stuff like that, I actually found out that the CEO was a single point of failure. His people were being meeting to death. And then he had to approve almost every action that had to happen in that organization. And, you know, he had been doing the same thing, from what his employees told me, for about 5 years. And these guys were not resistant to that changing at all. They just were not. But did it change? Absolutely. I only worked with them because they only wanted to work with me for about it was 4 months. And in that 4 months, we did make some very valuable changes. And I still talk to this person, and he lets me know that, you know, that it's still working. And he just would have never understood without a third party perspective that he was the single point of failure. And now that's that is an interesting thing that we're calling it a single point of failure, because this business was still highly successful. And this is something that we have to point out, that when something like this happens, it's not always just going to plummet and things are going to fall apart immediately. Usually it's a very slow progression. And these things they happen all the time, because when you promote somebody to a manager, they're very nervous. Sometimes they're, can I say, scared? I think they are. What do you I mean, Chris, they're probably scared. So they do not want to do a bad job. And so even if you've told them leading up to getting their position, you put them through training, you gave them that mentorship leading up to you know, them accepting that position. Once they take it, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened there. But once they take that position, they feel like they got to be in control for the sake of survival. And that's because they're new. When something is new, you got to pay a little bit more attention to it, because if you don't, and maybe that person had some experience before, maybe they didn't, but if they didn't have experience before and you promoted them within your organization, then likely there are pre-existing relationships there. There are a lot of things going on that person doesn't understand, because they were doing the job before. They were down here. Now they're managing the job, and now they have to lead too. By the way, managing the job and leading, those are not the same thing. That's a show for another time. But
Yeah.
you know, this whole single point of failure thing that we're talking about here, that doesn't mean it's a failure. That this is an excellent developmental point. And people, this is common. I did it. Well, I know Chris did it, because we had a conversation about that weeks ago, a couple months ago. But you know, it's just one of those things that it has to be coached out. That if you have the right mentor or the right person to walk beside you, once you become that first time leader, or if you don't find it out till later on, if you get that mentorship, you can work your way out of this. And from the leadership perspective, if you find somebody in your organization that's doing it, that doesn't mean they're intentionally toxic. That just means that person needs a little bit of help. Maybe they're struggling with their own internal ego mechanisms, and they just need to be coached out of it. What are your thoughts?
That's a great point, JJ. And I'm gonna play the other side of that coin for a second, because
oh boy.
Yeah, there are times that it's a developmental thing that through the right training, through the right mentorship, you can help, you know, one of your down trace leaders to elevate and get out of the weeds and really be there as a resource for their team. But at the same time, it's our job as leaders to sometimes let people go from our organization. Not everyone deserves to be a part of our organization. And if it is not developmental, or if they are resistant to changing their ways, and even if they've been told that they are the single point of failure, if they won't get out of the weeds, and if they won't stop micromanaging people to the detriment of the team, then you've got to have enough confidence to let that person go. It's like, I'm a firm believer in the 3-strike policy, unless it's catastrophic. But I'll take it this way: strike number 1, I'm having a conversation with you, and I'm just kind of laying out what I'm seeing, and it's going to be a one-on-one dialogue. Step number 2 is we're going to have a second conversation. I'm going to document it, and I'm going to let you know what needs to be fixed in what time frame. And then strike number 3 is you're out. Like, I don't have the patience to deal with someone who's going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. If it's been prescribed to them, and especially if they've agreed, you'll have a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I do micromanage. And thanks for those tips on how to get out of the weeds. And then you're in Groundhog Day having the same conversation over and over again. And you're just like, you know what, dude, you don't get this, and you got to go find another place to work.
Right. Well, and that, Dixon, I hope that answered your question, because how do you handle employees who resist taking ownership of responsibilities? You know, sometimes they don't understand. What's that?
You show them the door.
You should. Well, you show them the door if they can't. If it's one of those things where it's a developmental thing, then you can try to coach them through it. If not, folks, there's one thing that a lot of people have a hard time understanding and actually having the confidence to do as leaders. And it's letting people go if things are hard, and actually starting the conversation when somebody is doing something wrong. It's hard. But if you don't correct these things, the level of toxicity that spreads, it's not just with that person's team. It's just not. Unfortunately, it's like ooze that just spreads through organizations, because it's like a monkey see, monkey do thing, right? Well, if that guy lets his team do it, why can't I do it too? Sort of a thing. And then if that person has a certain amount of success on a specific project, that leader, and another leader sees that they had success on a project and that's how they're leading, and they ask that person for advice, do you think that person's going to start running their team the exact same way, or trying to, because they want to have that level of success too? They of course, immediately micromanaging has success. It always does. When you get in the weeds and you start, playing puppet master and rubbing your funk all over everything, yes, things start moving. But if you make that the norm, that is what we're talking about here, people. You cannot make that the norm. Go back and watch our last episode, because that's how you solve immediate problems.
Yep.
Detrimental problems. Because even immediate problems, you don't always necessarily want to get in the weeds. You want to allow your team to solve those problems on their own. But you help where you can, you advise, and if you need to dig in a little bit, you can. But you should, very rarely should you actually get in the weeds unless it's super detrimental or it's a huge initiative or something like that. So that, but when it comes to somebody who doesn't take ownership, you got to let them go. If you don't, it spreads. It spreads like wildfire. And then But we had another question pop up here, and I'll let you answer this one, Chris. So I'm not going to put it up on the board because he put a really good perspective up here. But at the end, he said, my question is, at what point does leadership stop being about influence and start becoming an exercise in institutional architecture? Well, that's what we're referring to here. But go ahead.
Yeah. Man, that's a great.
It's a really good question. I mean, I can go into that just a little bit while you're thinking, Chris.
Yeah, it's yeah, dude, it's 8:30 on a Saturday morning. Like,
no,
you're really making my brain work today.
So it's always about influence.
It is.
And you build the architecture as things develop, in my opinion.
Well, it's the architecture can be influenced by so many different things, right? So if you think about it this way, the organizational architecture, if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's kind of how it's laid out in the organizational chart, or for the people that are out there running on EOS, it's the accountability chart, and it's the architecture of who does what, who's accountable for what. But then so much of what drives that is the culture. So regardless of the seat that you're sitting in within that organization, the culture is what propels the performance. And it's having that set of values that what we always say is that culture are your values in action. So when you are very focused on the values in your organization, it creates that culture that permeates through every single seat. So regardless of how the organization is structured, it's having the right culture and making sure you have the right people in the right seats. That's the other part of it. You could have right culture fits who are sitting in the wrong seat. And that could be leading to a bottleneck. That could be a root cause symptom to certain things. So you've got to look at where people are sitting in the organization if they're truly a right fit. If they're not a right fit, that's another reason to let people go. Like, as soon as you allow people who are not a cultural fit in your organization to continue there, you're on a very slippery slope to destroying what you've spent time building.
Yeah. I mean, systems are important. I mean, you should always have systems in place.
Yep.
But each person in that the architecture that Chris just got done talking about, it's important that you still have the influence within that architecture. How the CEO wants it all the way through should be what is enforced. If you're about influence, about trust, about making sure that teams operate independently, but they empower each other to do what they got to do and coach and mentor and all that other stuff, then that's what you make sure that you are not only having your COO and CMO and all those on all your immediate people doing, but then you're having that trickle down. You make sure that that is intentionally said throughout the entire business. Chris is right. It's a culture thing. However you want that culture to look, you influence that culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's never not about influence, but it's about trusting, but verifying and developing and making sure that things are happening the way you want them to happen without digging into the weeds all the time. And
Yep.
and so that's a multifaceted question. That's why we kind of had to think about that for a second. It's always about influence, but it's always about systems. And so it's tough to just do a quick answer, but I hope that kind of, let me see, who was that who said that? Maher Mufta. Well, Maher, I hope we answered that in a way that helped you. If not, ask a follow-up. We'll be here. We could be here for a couple more minutes. We don't, if we have audience interaction, we like to answer those questions. So let me see. We had one more. How do you build trust in a team that's used to relying on the leader for every decision? Well, to me, you teach that leader how to not have his fingers up in the mix, support him through that change, and then make sure you reinforce everything that he is saying when his employees start coming up to you and talking to you about that stuff.
Yeah.
Change only happen. If they get worse, there's resistance. If they get better, there's resistance. You got to make sure that person has support no matter what. If you don't support your down trace leaders, things will fall apart. So it's about support, in my opinion.
It's absolutely about support. But another thing that that I've done and I've seen it work very well to build trust when the team is always relying on the leader for every decision is to put it back in their hands, right? Sometimes you as the leader need to step back, or if it's a subordinate leader to you, you need to kind of pull them back a little bit and say, look, if the goal is this and your plan, you ask your people on the team, hey, come up with a plan. How would you do this? If their plan is in line with yours, 85, 90%, then you know what? You say, that's a great plan. Go with your plan. Start giving them the leeway to do it. Like, that is a fast trust builder. When someone comes to you and says, hey, we're working on this, boss, and this is how we'd like to do it, rock and roll, go do it that way. Oh, wow. And then if something happens, right, they make a mistake, they skin their knee. It's your job as the boss to have their back and to support them, not tell them, I told you so. And if we did it my way, this wouldn't have happened. Let your people make those small failures. They will learn from them. And you, just by doing that, you will continue to build some trust with your people because they know that you've got their back and they're like, all right, this guy's going to let me breathe a little bit. And he's got my best interest in mind, along with the best interest of the organization. And one little speed bump isn't going to get me fired. So now let's step on the gas.
Yes. And you know what? I went to directly what our topic was relating to without thinking that, without, opening my mind like you just did and talking more about how to create trust in a team. I think that overall, the only thing that I would add to that, Chris, is that if you want the team to build trust and that leader, to still be the one that's trusted, you have to coach that guy through how to delegate.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can't just automatically jump in there and do it for them. You can't do that.
Right.
Like you said, you got to pull them back. Yeah. It's kind of like that parenting thing. You kind of made that analogy in the beginning of the show. You agree in public and disagree in private. If you disagree with that leader in front of his employees and try to correct him while he's doing craziness, then they're going to think he's crazy and that his boss thinks he's a screw up. So you got to pull him back, explain what is happening, what he's doing right and what he's doing wrong. I mean, do an AAR with him. But once you point out those developmental points that need to be changed, just make sure you let them know to be there with you. Can you create the trust in their team? No, you teach that leader how to create trust in their team.
That's
you don't dig into that team. If you just take over that team and that leader stays in place, you might as well fire him.
Yep.
Because you just ruined that leader's reputation.
That's right.
So you need to coach that guy through it. And if you can't be coached through it, then that's another time where you might have to let him go, because there's only one way to create trust on a team, and that's to empower that leader to do what he's got to do and support him through it. If you don't do that, and that's not one of those situations that you get in the weeds, because you're just going to make everything worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the only thing I have to add to what you said. Okay, everybody. I think we hit an end point. This is where, Chris, I ask you, do you have anything to add? Final talking points.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation, and I love the interaction with people in the chat. I guess the final talking point here is, don't be afraid to kind of step back and let your folks do things to see if you're actually that single point of failure. And to see whether or not things kind of blow up when you're not there. Do yourself a favor and go on a little vacation, and then see how things are when you come back. And if it's absolute chaos, then you know that you've got a problem with yourself as a leader being too far in the weeds. You need to identify that and work on it.
And why does it fall apart when you leave? It's because you didn't empower them.
That's right.
And so the only thing I would add, again, to what you just said is, this is not a common concept in corporate culture today. There are some organizations that do it very well, but you should not be the person who is needed to make your team survive every day in the workplace.
Yep.
You just shouldn't. This is true leadership. This is not managing. You can manage and manage and manage and manage, and then your team will need you every day and you can't take a vacation. You need to lead your team and you need to empower them to do the things that they got to do so that if you have to step away, the operation doesn't stop. And by the way, you may think that might mean that you're not needed on that team, but they're still going to need you to come back because you are their support system. You are the one that makes sure that you're passing down all the tasks and supporting them through the execution for those things and answering questions and helping every day. You're like that team's mentor. You have your place on that team, but your place is not to be in the weeds. Your place is to let them do what they got to do. Mm-hmm. And it's tough, but you can do it. If you leave and your team falls apart, when you come back, you should probably look in the mirror and figure out what to do next. That's all we got today, folks. Thank you for tuning in. I didn't do a plug-in for my books, but go to Amazon.com and type in JJ Hardy. Once you get past the baseball player, you'll find me, and you'll find Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, and Resilience Built, Not Bored. But please, if you enjoyed this live, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or to follow me on the other platforms. But if you want something specific, gosh, I don't know. Don't necessarily reply to these comments below. I don't know if I'll see it or not. There were a lot of them today. So send me an email at jj@victoryleadershipcoaching.com, and I'll make sure that we take your suggestions to heart and we do it. But don't forget to subscribe. You're not going to see these lives if you're not following me or subscribe to my platform. So make that happen so that we can see you again. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in now and in the future, and we will see you next time.
Have an awesome day.